Well, hi everyone. I usually do talks on my own on this channel, but I keep threatening to bring in experts in different fields, and today I'm doing just that. So this is the first of what I hope is a series of interviews. Again, the theme here is really widening the understanding and use of geospatial technology. And I have Scott with me, who I'm going to get to introduce himself and pronounce his last name, which I always struggle with a little bit, to talk about data fusion. So Scott, why don't you get the ball rolling and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Scott Pesanowski. I've had a long background in the geospatial field. I started my career actually with MapQuest way back. For some of you that might remember, first job out of college, I got a master's at University of South Carolina. Worked at Esri for a couple of years. I worked for 15 years actually, my alma mater, in State University, as a researcher, doing some really cool stuff. I was blessed to be around in all of my positions, a lot of really, really smart people. In computer consulting and training company, focused on basically, in a sense, using modern computing technologies like AI and geospatial, big data technologies to solve real world problems. So this is I got my PhD in program at Penn State in informatics, and this is something that we really focused on is using things like artificial intelligence, but to solve real world problems. So this is me.
Yeah, thanks for that intro, Scott. So I think you probably said it there, but I always like to ask the Simon Sinek why question. Your purpose. What is it that drives you? What's your passion?
I mean, so once again, we say like I have a long background, I guess, in technology. I have a lot of experience, and maybe in the past I kind of like fell into some of these traps as well, where I would do, like, for example, coding. I would develop something because it was like really kind of cool. It was like, okay, this is a cool thing to do. But in the end, I guess over the course of time, I kind of realized this is technology is great, but really it's wonderful when it solves our problems. It makes our lives easier. So this is kind of, I guess you say my why.
I like it. It's my why as well. And I think it's an interesting, that's why I think this will be interesting, this conversation, because often people focus on the technology and the data and they get wowed by it, but they forget that it serves a purpose to solve particular problems. So it's really that ultimately solving problems with data and technology that's critical.
Yeah, and to be honest, when I was younger, I might have fallen into that trap a little bit myself. So
so we're going to talk data fusion today. What is data fusion? Let's start there.
Data fusion, a lot of, you hear this a lot, big data, and people usually talk about, like, what you say, like the quantity, but then they always say with big data, you've got the volume. What is it? Your V's, big data V's. So volume, veracity, variety, I forget the other ones. But basically, in a sense, big data is when you've got, lots of data, but you've also got from varying different data sources. And data fusion is about bringing all of these different data sets from different, different, you can have your remotely sensed data, imagery, you can have your your traditional vector data, you can have data, data derived from remotely sensed data. And also too, I did a lot of work, in the past with text. Yeah, so you got your text data, you got your video sources. So it's all about bringing all of those together for, once again, solving problems. So, just as an example, a lot of folks, that might, follow yourself, Matt, in the geospatial world are familiar with Esri. Here recently, they did a lot of really amazing things with putting out these pre-trained models, pre-trained deep learning models that do amazing things. Don't get me wrong, but most of their pre-trained models, they work on basically in a sense, one layer. So they'll work on RGB imagery, they'll work on SAR imagery, So in a sense, or even though we work on lidar, this is just in a sense one layer. If you can fuse, if this is just really only touching the surface. So once you fuse other data sources with, so you got your RGB, but then you're fusing lidar, you can solve a lot more problems. So this is kind of like data fusion, putting all those together. I'll just give kind of a quick example here. So I have a current project with World Health Organization. I'm doing some consulting for World Health Organization, and for that, what I'm doing is trying to analyze and predict disease spread in Africa, really on a massive scale, continental scale. But in order to predict disease, I'm bringing in data sources from lots of different, a variety of data sources. So I've got temperature sensed from satellites. I've got precipitation sensed from satellites. I've got the actual case counts, which is on the administrative district. So kind of like in a sense, vector data or tabular data. And then I've got elevation. I've got population, and so fusing all of these different data sets, basically, once again, in the end, solve a real world problem, which is, find out why disease is spreading in a certain way, and also to, predict the disease spread and changes in disease spread.
Yeah, that's a good example. So, I mean, spatial is where we're focused here. Geospatial, spatial, let's call it spatial, since geospatial sits under that. So when I think, I've been on this sort of train for a little while of thinking that we've now, in the spatial world, we've now got not just two-dimensional data, which is historically where a lot of the GIS injury have sat, but now we've got three-dimensional data, we've got four-dimensional data. So having the ability to fuse that data together, leverage the spatial component of that data, and answer questions which have any number of different questions. It might just be a two-dimensional question, it might be a multi-dimensional 3D, 2D question, it might be a change question which needs 4D. So the ability to reach in to this pool of data that's fused and then come out with answers is really what we're talking about. Am I on the right lines there?
Yeah, exactly right. And also too, you're really, really hinting on what is so important about spatial. At least as far as data fusion as well. So spatial, you got your X, you got your Y, you got your Z, you got time. Sometimes you've got, like you said, other attributes, other dimensions. But so in the past, I spent a lot of time with, relational databases, relational database management systems. So your Postgres, PostGIS, MySQL spatial, Oracle spatial. So in that world, you always hear, okay, joins, SQL joins. You're always talking about SQL joins. But what spatial gives us is almost like a natural join of your data. So this is really, really hinting on why is spatial so valuable in data fusion? Because once you have that X, Y, Z time, and time is obviously really important. You've got really a natural SQL join of your data. So this is why space is important. Taking lots and lots of different data sets that are very, very diverse, and putting together a really natural join by location.
Yeah, that made me think back in the day when I was working in 𝐒𝐳𝐴 as a developer. We used to talk about related tables, and we'd connect tables together and go through this sequence of doing that. What you're talking about here is that natural connection, that natural tie between these different data sets, these fused data sets based on the location or an address or an XY. It ties everything together in a much more natural way.
Yeah. Basically, it's where you say, it's not even like you have to set this up. It's not even you have to plan out your schema, how are things going to be joined. It's a natural join of your data. So this is also too, I'm a big, still to this day, I'm a really super big fan of spatial relational databases, your PostGIS, MySQL Spatial, because I feel like you can do really amazing things in those databases on, basically big data. So
Yeah. I might go off script here. Before we came on, Scott and I were thinking about how we want to construct this conversation, but usually it's nice to go off on tangents. I'm terrible for that. My wife always tells me, if you're going on a tangent, but it's a related tangent. So I think using examples, we're going to talk examples in a second, and we spoke off camera about that. But let me ask this question, Scott, then. So you and I have spoken a lot about generative AI and ChatGPT, and when I first explored this, when I started talking about GeoChatGPT, I was always thinking in terms of sort of the old world that I'd kind of inhabited, where if I ask a question that can be answered by an LLM, it can understand my text input and say, right, I think this is what this person's asking, my crude description of this. To reach back into the data to actually access an answer to that question I always had it in my mind, it's like you got to go to this layer, this layer, this layer, and this layer, like in that sort of layered model of maps. But what you're talking about here is we're really talking about, I must probably misuse the term, but like a blob of data, a whole mass of data in one place where you can reach in and you can connect dots within that data set to answer the question. Is that sort of the paradigm shift that we're talking about in terms of fusing data together?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say so. And so also too, what we're really talking about here is, like we say software world, business world. A lot of times you hear a lot about kind of like turnkey solutions. Okay. Mm-hmm. We've got a turnkey solution. So this is great, but turnkey solutions are always good for really specific problems. And as we kind of know, the world is complicated. Okay. The world is really complicated, especially when, now you're getting into like problems like related to environment, where you've got really, really complicated, diverse data sets. And these are global data sets, so how are we solving some of these environmental problems? Actually too, I've, kind of recently, I don't know, I've gotten on it, I guess, kind of like the way, I've done a lot of kind of, thinking and presentations about financial, artificial intelligence in the financial, I guess, kind of like I've gotten some interest in this. So in finance, you've got really, really, let's say diverse data sets. So the amount of things that, for example, the stock market. If you think about the stock market is influenced by our totality of our world environment, the events going on, things going on. So once again, these types of problems are not going to be solved by a turnkey solution. And so once again, this is kind of like where I'm trying to, if you think about the turnkey solutions, I'm kind of trying to think I'm trying to kind of like think of the opposite. So the world is complicated. You've got really complicated data sets, but you've got these challenges and they need to be solved. So this is why data fusion is so important in a sense. Some of the simple turnkey solutions that work on simple data layers, that's great for a specific problem, but we want to solve some of the more challenging problems.
Yeah. So, and I'm not going to, we were talking digital twin before we came in. I'm not sure where you want to go in terms of sort of just giving another example, but does that, another off the original topic, not off the original topic, the original what we were going to be talking about. So when I think about ChatGPT is not a turnkey solution. ChatGPT is a solution which can answer a multitude of different questions. Is that the journey we're on now in terms of getting answers? Questions can be what seems like a simple question, and we use site selection as an example. Where's the best place for a Starbucks in Salt Lake City? It's a complicated process to get the right data, the right geoprocessing, to get an output which is an accurate, good output. But are we now moving to a world maybe away from turnkey, which are very narrowly focused, to a broader, I can input something in a text way and have AI understand, get the right data, know the steps to get through to give me an answer. So it's a more flexible way of getting answers out of a system, which are, which is complex, because we live in a complex world. So we don't live in a one-dimensional world. We live in a multi-dimensional world. So questions we ask are usually more complex, and data fusion, which is connected via spatial, which is what we're talking about, helps us answer this multitude of questions from a sort of almost like a single interface, if you like. I hope I asked that question properly.
Yeah. So talking about ChatGPT, and certainly too, I really like your concept of a GeoChatGPT. So this is like kind of like a bit of a story. So at my previous position, I was a researcher at Penn State University. So when I first started, this is like, wow, more than 15 years ago. I was involved with a project where we were working with some basically for crisis management. We were working with Port Authority of New York. I believe our funding came from National Science Foundation. But so this is like, keep in mind, this is like 18 years ago. We were developing a system where you would have a large screen display. You would stand in front of that display, and we had some cameras that tracked motion, and you would, and we had a voice recognition, and you would have a big large screen display, and you would have a map, and you'd say something. You would have specific commands. Okay, so you would point to the display, and you say, okay, I'm interested in this location. Can you draw me a buffer that's 15 kilometers around this point? And you point to it. Okay, so at that point, that was like kind of like the commands were really super limited. You have to be really, really careful with the way you say things. Obviously, speech recognition was not good, and also too, there was a lot of hard coding in. So if somebody mentioned this word, we're hard coding it. But now, what's really, really kind of exciting is, once again, like, technology is catching up. So take that particular example, but now you've got ChatGPT that is going to understand your speech much more clearly, and no matter the multitude of ways you're going to say a particular command, it's going to understand that and translate that to what you're intending. This is really, really powerful. So you gave Matt, you gave a really good example about okay, we've got ChatGPT, which is you're even seeing it. We're even seeing examples of this. Okay, give me steps to solve a geospatial problem, and it spits out these steps. And now we're even seeing a couple of companies come along. Okay, we've got it's these steps, but now I want to connect it to, okay, let's take this the steps that it's spitting out and actually run those commands. So it's really, really kind of a fascinating time. Not only in the world, but in the spatial world. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I think change happens very slowly, and all of a sudden ChatGPT appeared, and people went, "Oh my gosh, now I've got like access to AI," because everyone hears about AI, and it's going to be interesting to see where that journey takes people to. And I think everyone's focused on ChatGPT. I think the reason GeoChatGPT was people gravitated to it, and I was surprised by the response to it, was that we're now talking about. It's really a paradigm shift. I said that before, but having the ability to do what you've just described, we haven't really been able to do that before. Everything's changed I wouldn't say overnight. This has been going on in the background for a long time, but it does mean that we need to think slightly differently about how we build and deliver solutions to customers. I think the adoption rate is going to be slow, but I think a lot of organizations are now beginning to think, okay, how do we give generative AI or some kind of a bot in front to allow people to ask complicated questions, and in the background work through all of the complexity without an expert in the middle, and then deliver an answer to that complicated question, which is simple. That brings everyone. I mean, in geospatial, we've always had difficulty bringing people in because we try and explain what it actually is. It's not always a map, or it's like, forget all of that stuff. We ask so many day-to-day business in our lives. We ask so many where questions, so many geospatial questions. We can take all of that away and say, don't worry about GIS, don't worry about geospatial, just ask a question, and we'll look at it and go, yep, there's a spatial component to this. We'll do all the clever work and give you the answer. So I think it widens the reach enormously of the technology and the data we're talking about. And I think fusing that data is a foundational piece of that journey, which is the our conversation today.
I felt like you couldn't have said that better. Honestly, it's I feel like this current state that we're in is kind of basically ChatGPT is kind of in a sense bringing AI to the masses, and there's a really good possibility similar technologies will bring spatial analysis to the masses. So
yeah. And that might be a good note to end on, Scott. This will be the first of a couple of interviews we'll do. So there's some themes here that we'll
maybe
discover.
too, I don't know. Maybe the next one about AI. Maybe I was going to say something might be a little controversial about OpenAI and my feelings towards ChatGPT, but or maybe it's a good segue. But I think it's obviously the OpenAI and their CEO, they're kind of like, it's controversial. Some people are kind of really, but honestly, I commend. I feel like it's a really amazing step that so large language models, which is behind ChatGPT. I mean, these have been around for quite some time, and there's been public large language models, but also too, Amazon's got their large language model. Google had their large language model. Twitter had their large language model. And a lot of us really kind of didn't know what they were doing with, kind of like, the kind of the big tech company, big brother kind of thing. So now I feel like this is a real, what OpenAI did. Of course, they're exposing a ton of problems, but this is kind of like, in a sense, how society advances. They're exposing a lot of problems, but now, hey, it does amazing things. So let's go and fix some of these problems.
Yeah, let's dive deeper into that one in our next conversation. I think there's a lot. Exactly. There's a lot to sort of that onion to peel back on this one. So let's make it our next conversation. Before we finish, Scott, how can people get hold of you if there's questions?
I mean, so first of all, I guess go on our social media. So Bright Labs, my company is Bright World Labs. Once again, we're really focused. So we're doing consulting and trainings. We're really focused on, once again, using technology to solve real world problems. So Bright World Labs, you can look us up. We're on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn. We're on even Facebook. We have a website, brightworldlabs.com. And then also to, feel free. I'm really happy to connect with any folks on LinkedIn myself. And that's, so I think if like you mentioned earlier, I have a distinctive last name. So if you Google me, you're gonna find me.
Yeah, and what I will do in the notes for the video, underneath the video, and in LinkedIn, I'll make sure that all your contact information is there and link to the website. So we'll make sure it's easier for people to find you. But for today, Scott, thanks for the conveation. Yeah. Fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. I enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Good,
and thank you too for all your videos. Honestly, I feel like I've really feel like I've been schooling actually some of your videos since you were getting 1 or 2 likes on your videos. So I really appreciate what you're doing. So
well, thanks. It was time that most of what I talk about is coming from folks like you. So it was time to put people like you in front of the camera and not have me pretend it's my ideas. A lot of these are me bringing other people's ideas together. So anyway, thanks, Scott. Brilliant stuff.
Thank you, Matt.
We'll do another one in the very near future. Great stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much.